in an industry protected by multiple and highly advanced safety systems, how could this happen? Now, by rewinding the events of that day, and by going deep into the investigation,
Traffic.
we can reveal the calamitous chain of events that brought two planes to exactly the same spot at exactly the same time. Investigators from the BFU, Germany's Federal Bureau of Aircraft Accident Investigation, are called to the scene. Jens Friedemann is put in charge of the crash site.
Die Untersuchung eines Flugunfalls.
The investigation of an air accident is like a forensic investigation, a crime scene. One wants to establish the facts.
An einem crime scene. Wir beginnen
At the accident site, we start in total chaos. There's wreckage lying around everywhere.
Chaos. Also da liegen viele Wrackteile.
Friedemann can take nothing for granted. Not even that the two planes collided.
Das waren zwei Flugzeuge unterwegs.
Two aircraft were in the air. Whether they had collided or just flown past each other too close and lost control, or something like that, we just didn't know.
Verloren wurde oder so etwas, das wussten wir natürlich nicht.
Without the black boxes, Friedemann must try to work out what happened by examining the shattered fragments of wreckage. Key pieces are brought to a specialized storage facility in northern Germany. To Friedemann's eye, the mangled metal soon tells a clear story.
The Boeing nur an einer Stelle.
The Boeing made contact with the Tupolev in one spot. The vertical tail section was broken off.
The
Tupolev was damaged around the left wing and on the left-hand side of the fuselage. There was also evidence of a collision on the underside of the right wing.
The wreckage reveals that the DHL cargo plane and the Bashkirian charter did collide mid-air.
We now know what happened. The question is, why did it happen? How could it happen that they got so close?
At the crash site, amidst the fragmented pieces of the two planes, investigators have finally found what they've been looking for: the black boxes from both planes.
This was very important for us as accident investigators.
The BFU's Johann Reuss joins the investigation. It is his job to analyze the contents of the recorders.
The cockpit voice recorder sehr geholfen, damit wir
The cockpit voice recorders help us understand what happened in the cockpit, how the pilots reach their decisions.
Reuss begins by examining the pilot's traffic collision avoidance system, TCAS.
Our first question was to establish whether TCAS had worked the way it was intended to, the way it was designed.
TCAS builds a three-dimensional map around an aircraft using its altitude, speed, and heading. All planes fitted with TCAS constantly transmit this information to each other. If planes get too close to one another, TCAS warns the pilots.
Traffic.
And if necessary, gives them what is called a resolution advisory.
Descend.
Examining the black box, Reuss quickly establishes that the system had worked the way it was supposed to.
Traffic.
Before the collision, both TCAS systems generated and displayed a resolution advisory. The Russian Tupolev was instructed to climb, and the DHL Boeing to descend.
If the aircraft had followed these instructions, there would have been no collision. But while the pilots of the DHL plane obeyed TCAS,
Descend. Descend.
the Russian crew did not.
Climb. Climb.
Experts from the United States are headed to the scene of the deadly mid-air collision of two aircraft in southern Germany.
The Überlingen mid-air collision is now world news. The media are speculating freely and looking for someone to blame.
The pilot of the Russian plane is said to have ignored repeated instructions from air traffic controllers.
Why did the TCAS device meant to avoid collisions, in this case maybe help cause one? And why didn't the Russian plane descend when first ordered? A language problem? Controller commands are always in English.
Black box recordings quickly eliminate one theory.
Zurich, good evening. VTC 2937, level 360.
Wir haben mit diesem Cockpit Voice Recorder
With the cockpit voice recorder, we were able to establish that language was not the problem. The Russian crew understood English perfectly well.
But the recorders reveal a surprising fact.
Climb. Climb. This is climb.
He's guiding us down.
Wir gemerkt haben,
We noticed that there was an instruction from the air traffic controller.
VTC 2937, descent flight level 350.
And we found that at the same time, or immediately afterwards, there was also a TCAS advisory.
Climb. Climb.
At almost exactly the same time, the Russian pilots were instructed to do two completely different things.
Descent flight level 350, expedite.
die Besatzung
Now the crew needs to make a very, very fast decision.
sehr,
What
sehr
do they
schnelle
do
Entscheidung
next?
finden, was macht
And we
sie
discovered that
daraus?
the crew had extreme difficulty making this decision.
But it should have been straightforward. The two planes were flying over Germany, and European regulations clearly state that TCAS has priority over air traffic controllers.
Also insofern war das für mich
For me, there was absolutely no explanation why something like this would happen.
Climb. Climb.
Warum hat die Besatzung
Why didn't the crew use TCAS the way it could and should be used?
sollte oder TCAS nutzen könnte?
By April 2001, TCAS was mandatory in most of the world. But investigators discover one notable exception: Russia. Could it be that the Russian crew did not know how to use TCAS? Rustam Mustafin is a former Bashkirian pilot. He confirms that even though not standard for domestic flights, planes flying overseas were specially fitted with TCAS.
Как только международное сообщество ИКАО предъявило требования по снабжению.
As soon as the TCAS requirement was introduced, the training school of Bashkirian Airlines ensured that our pilots were trained to use the system.
Mustafin regularly flew with the pilots of flight BTC 2937.
By the time of the disaster, we had acquired extensive experience using it.
The crew knew how TCAS worked, but ignored its instructions. The Tupolev's flight manual, the pilot's operational Bible, reveals why.
Wir haben aus diesen Handbüchern gelernt, dass
We learned from these manuals that the orders from air traffic control always have a higher priority.
immer eine höhere Priorität haben.
The operations manual at the time stated that the air traffic control command was to be given precedence over TCAS in the event of the system issuing an alert. It said that the air traffic control had the final authority.
Contrary to European regulations, the Russian crew were trained to use TCAS only as an advisory system and could choose to follow the controller's instructions if they wanted. They were following TCAS regulations, but Russian style.
I would have done exactly what these guys did. I would have carried out the air traffic control command.
Suddenly, we were able to understand why the crew acted the way they did.
Investigators have discovered why both planes were in descent. While the DHL crew had followed TCAS, the Russian pilots obeyed air traffic control. But this doesn't answer a more basic question. TCAS is meant as a system of last resort. The planes shouldn't be close enough even to trigger it in the first place. Investigators have turned their attention to the air traffic control room. A controller must advise pilots to change altitude at least 2 minutes before a potential conflict. But Peter Nielsen didn't tell the Russian crew to descend until just 43 seconds before collision.
BTC 2937 descent.
Warum ist die Anweisung für die
Why did the air
Staffelung
traffic controller issue the separation order so late?
So spät,
So late that the danger of an accident actually
Gefahr
existed.
eines Unfalls tatsächlich gegeben war.
Through shift logs and interviews, investigators learned that Nielsen was the only air traffic controller on duty on the night of July the 1st. Official Skyguide policy is to have a minimum of 2 air traffic controllers on duty at any given time. Investigators learned that it had become standard procedure at Skyguide for one controller to go on an extended break during the night shift. Tom Larsen was a close friend of Nielsen's, working alongside him for many years.
The way that Peter was doing night shift, we did that all the time. There would only be one controller because there was very little traffic.
Between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., there are no scheduled landings at any of the airports in the area. But then, at about 11:25 on July the 1st, 2002, Nielsen is presented with an unexpected landing.
There was an approach into Friedrichshafen Airport, which he had to coordinate.
It's very unusual that one aircraft comes at that time for Friedrichshafen. I guess that the controller was a little surprised about that.
Regulations state that Nielsen must contact the airport control tower before bringing the delayed plane in for landing. This should be routine.
Dieses Backup, was als zusätzliche Verbindung noch
The backup, which should have been there as an additional link, was not working that evening. Phone communication was not possible due to a technical problem.
Nielsen tries repeatedly to call Friedrichshafen. A routine task is suddenly taking up most of his time.
Die gewünschte Verbindung ist nicht möglich.
War mehr beschäftigt?
He was busier than would normally have been the case because he had no way of making phone calls. He had to look for alternate solutions. He had to look for other ways to communicate.
I lost my phone connection to Friedrichshafen. Could you please call them on your second set?
Preoccupied with handing over the delayed Airbus, Nielsen ignores the passing traffic.
It was like 5 minutes that he was focused on that problem. So that took his vigilance away from what was going on the screen, on the radar screen.
But his